In the heart of South Africa's coastal gem, Durban, a vibrant subculture breathes life into its concrete canvas. Welcome to a world where art transcends boundaries, where walls speak stories, and where the spirit of rebellion converges with creativity. This is a journey into the realm of Durban's graffiti artists, the visionaries who paint their aspirations, struggles, and dreams onto the city's walls. Join us as we delve into the lives and inspirations of the prominent artists who've turned Durban's urban landscape into an ever-evolving masterpiece. Together, they challenge norms, provoke thought, and leave an indelible mark on the soul of this coastal metropolis.
The social commentary of graffiti is not what it says. It's the fact that it exists. That's the social commentary. It's the fact that so much of our urban space is commodified and can be sold to whoever can afford to put whatever they want, advertising, billboards, and whatever. We've commodified our urban spaces. So when someone comes along and claims that space, people get like shocked. It's a shock. Why? Because we've got this sense of property, of ownership. So there's this question around vandalism. And this is why graffiti is not vandalism for me. When you vandalize something, an object, like take this bottle. The purpose of this bottle is to hold liquid. If I break the bottle, it can no longer hold liquid. It can no longer perform its function. If I break a window, it can no longer be a window. It's been vandalized. But when I paint a wall, it's still a wall. It's not vandalized. What has been so what we're saying is, so what has been vandalized? What has been broken? What's been broken is your sense of ownership, of property.
So graffiti means a lot to different people. I mean, the original meaning of graffiti was all about lettering structure, shapes, colors. And I think over the years and internationally, you've started to notice people now moving the art scene into bigger sort of murals where they more on concept and themes and portraits mixed with lettering. Sometimes it's even portraits on their own. And it's slowly evolving into this whole new art scene where you get the graffiti guys who are proper graffiti, and you get the street artists, muralists who are now like further out in terms of visual stuff, you know. But I think you're always going to have the divide between the two.
Graffiti is writing your name on the street. Yeah, that's graffiti, not murals and productions, and that's beautiful. They've got their spaces and whatever, you know, but graffiti is a form of street art that is about putting your name on the street. Now, your name doesn't necessarily have to be, you can think of it more as like a brand or a logo or a signature or tag, you know, that's why it looks like a signature. But what you're doing is, yes, it's about your repeated repetition of your identity, you know. I exist, I exist, I exist. I'm here, I was here. And at the same time, without people then knowing who you are. It's enough for you to say, I exist, and then move on. You know, so the other thing about graph is that graffiti is not done for anyone other than other graffiti writers. It's not done for people's appreciation. People can appreciate it, and art people can appreciate it, and there are graffiti artists that do go out of their way to connect with people, because you understand the responsibility of, oh, if I'm putting something up in the street, it's got to be bigger than just me, because I'm not the only person in the street. Some people, but for other people, they don't care, man. One of the coolest things I ever heard was from a South African graffiti artist, Wheels. I remember him saying, graffiti writers write for other graffiti writers. So when I put my name up, I'm not thinking about what you, the average person, thinks or trying to communicate with you. No, I'm thinking about the next graffiti artist that comes along and sees that and knows what it is and recognizes that I'm communicating with them.
Because graffiti is not really about exposure, really. It's about dominance in a space. So if I write my name on this wall and you paint over this wall, with your name, now we're going to step into some dangerous territory because in this game that has meaning. If you go over my thing, it means you more dominant than me, or you higher up. Normally you'll battle on the wall, and then whoever's more dominant obviously will win the spot and then keep dominance. But that is the old way. In the new way, you will battle, but then you have to put up a prize, or have to put up some sort of clause or something that makes it worthwhile. So we'll say that if I beat you, you must not paint ever again.
So there aren't many legal spots where you're allowed to paint, and most times where it is legal to paint, it'll already have artwork there. So the artwork maybe on a specific wall that you want to paint on, you either try and find contact with that guy, that painter there, and ask him, hey man, would you like to collab and go over this old work of yours, put something new and fresh there? That way you're not causing any friction on the streets, you're not causing any beef or problems. You're giving the guy the opportunity to either come. He could say, no man, you can actually go over it, no problem, no foul, no harm done, you know. And or you could be arrogant and claim it and not ask him and just go over the work yourself and be like, I'm claiming the spot, this is now my spot, and then that could spark some beef.
Graffiti relies on the artist's name, and it's based on the letters of their name. And so when there is no name involved or that style, it starts to shift into more of a mural. So my recent thought is that maybe graffiti is dependent on a lot of factors, and maybe one of them is that it has to be illegal and on the streets. So in some ways, a lot of the work that gets produced legally that still relates to graffiti is actually just referential of the movement and doesn't fit into that category.
So a lot of the guys will see you only doing commission work and only doing portraits and that sort of route of murals or graffiti. And they say you're not a graffiti artist because you don't actually do the graffiti lettering. So I think it's personal to each and to everyone on their own, but I use spray paint. I use the same cans as you. Just because I don't actually do graffiti lettering doesn't mean I'm not a graffiti artist. So I think from the days back in New York where it first started in that subculture, that was like the OG thing, was you do graffiti lettering and that was that. And then over time the characters started coming in, then eventually it was portraits coming in. And the scene's it's grown into this huge sort of arts culture where I don't think there's a very small line between the two.
I think the distinction is legalities. It's a mural is painted legally, but also maybe beyond that, it's somebody's asked you to do it. And graffiti is nobody's asked you to do it, and it's outside of like the laws that govern public space.
I think I chose graffiti as a hobby originally because it just gave you the freedom to express, the freedom to be yourself, the freedom to meet people and paint in areas that you weren't naturally used to, you know? And I think over time, it becomes a passion, it becomes an addiction. It's something you want to do every day and make your job and make something work out of the whole culture, you know?
I was in high school and I hadn't had the best early high school years, and I finally found myself at a school where I was happy, and I found a great group of friends, and we were kind of like different ages, and we skated together. And I was very influenced by these older kids, and some of the music they were listening to was hip-hop music, and so I started getting into it. And I'd always been very into art, cartoons, comics, graphic novels. And some of these kids were artists. And one of these dudes had an art folder, and he'd customized his art folder. And I just thought that was so cool, you know, made it his own. And he had this design on his art folder, and I was just like, it was crazy. It looked like tribal tattooing. And I was like, that is so cool. Did you do that? Yeah, I did it by hand. I did it with a marker. And I was like, that's amazing. You know, how did you come up with the design? And he said, look. He said, it's my name. And I was like, what? And he's like, look. And he spelled it out. And I was like, what? And I watched it become a word. And that was it.
What I got known for is writing my name. My name is what I write, and I don't do it for money, and I don't do it for fame or anything. It's just because I associate writing with a certain, it's therapeutic. So sometimes if you have problems or something and you go paint, it allows you to think over your problems and zone in and find solutions, and it just gives you peace. So it's not actually my job, it's more of an outlet.
I found that graffiti was a good form of expressing, you know, what's inside you and what you want to try. You know, it's not like I did it as a career. It's not like I did it to like really make anything of it. It was more or less as an outlet on how I can express myself as an individual.
Every time I went back to graph, my mind was being blown again and again and again. And it was just this one culture. And then you start to see that it's attached to these other things. Breakdance, rap, the music. I'm like, dude, this is just like, it's like, imagine you had no culture. You had no sense of culture, you know? And maybe growing up as a white English-speaking kid in South Africa, you kind of divorce from your culture because your immediate ancestry is not something you want to recognize, you know? You're like, yo, not really proud of that, you know? So there's this weird tension between you and your culture, because your culture is something that needs to be held to account in a way that maybe, you know, people of color and your black friends and whatever can stand and say, this is my culture. You don't have that. And then you get this thing that no one can own. It's from somewhere else, you know, and you're like, this is my culture. It's everything that a culture has. It's got, you know, forefathers and foremothers. It's got roots. It's got like, yeah, everything. It speaks to every aspect of your personality, the way you dress, the way you speak, the way you think, you know. It's just like, give me more, man. Give it to me in any form, you know. And then you're like, but I want to be part of it. I can't just spectate.
There were several artists who were arrested painting a wall that had been painted a number of times. And it was understood to be a legal wall. And the headlines were always like, gang of graffiti artists caught. And I don't think there's any situations where gang is a positive meaning. I don't even think it said graffiti artists. But so it's that sort of terminology forces the misconception that art done with spray paint is a negative, and then it's linked to the medium. And I think I've had discussions with friends, and we've sort of said that as soon as you're painting a wall with a paintbrush, it's seen as, oh, you're painting. But then it's the medium of spray paint where people suddenly are like, what are you doing? Like, this is not allowed.
What I found was, if you do stuff that's not appealing to the people around that community, they're not going to be happy. But if you do stuff that it looks nice, the chances of them being unhappy and actually charging you is much less. So basically, you got to get your skill up, and you got to get your pieces looking so nice that even when the person approaches you, they're actually grateful that you did this piece of art and you made their place look nice. But if you just vandalize, then definitely you're going to have legal issues for sure. If the person doesn't want the art and they want to pursue it and charge you, then you're going to get charged, and it'll be malicious damage to property. I've only been charged with that once.
We had an incident when we were painting, and the cops rocked up. They had guys on the roof, and it was in the daytime. And then literally it was a legal wall we had painted for 15 years, every year. And then this year we decided to put it on Facebook, and then the cops did this whole sting operation. They had guys with snipers on the roof, and all of us are like 8 vans of police rocked up, and we're all standing there like, what's going on here? And then, they took us to the cells in Ambilo, court cases, and I just started my job at the time, and I had to tell my boss, I've got to go to court now for graffiti. But they never ever found evidence, and all of us are just shocked. We were like, what is this? So we've been doing this every year, and now we're getting buzzed for it, kind of thing, you know?
There was an artist was hit by a truck. He was killed, a young guy. And typically what happens when someone is killed in the scene is we paint a tribute. There's like a jam, and everybody paints their name. It's one of the ways he's like someone, if everybody knew him, this person's passed on, everybody paints his name or her name in their style to pay tribute. And so someone had set up a jam to paint this kid's name. They were going to do it. It was like a Sunday, it was a public wall, they had permission to paint the wall and whatever. But there was a journalist who kind of got wind of it and alerted the cops and said, this is a bunch of graph writers. And so it became like a sting operation, and they set it up. And so as everybody, we were getting calls on our way to the wall, like, don't come, it's a setup, And then a bunch of like 5 or 6 Durban artists, ranging, like older established guys and some young kids who were just there, Full on, back of the van, down there, holding cell, bail, the whole deal. Which we were like, okay. But the next day in the paper, right, it said, gangs of graffiti artists arrested. And on the opposite page was another headline that said, gang assaults and rapes, I can't remember what it was. It was a housebreaking. And I was like, the use of the word gang and the use of the word gang, that doesn't line up, right? So we just that was it.
Before canvas was invented, walls must have been the dominant surface. We don't link all painting to cave painting. Like, we don't link all sculpture to ancient sculptures. They have different intentions and they go in different places. I think my assumption is that a lot of these links are made to try and validate why or what kids in the 60s and 70s were doing. But I think at this point, we don't need to create those links to validate it. I think that the validity of it is what they were doing. And it speaks more to the social issues.
I've done it all over, man. I used to have a place in Argyle Road. It was like a semi-abandoned building, and I painted that building inside and out, and I kept it neat, clean, and also influenced the people who were living there to increase their quality of living, clean up the place, get jobs, and they did that.
The common viewpoint of it, and from chatting with students, they see it as like a parent holding up their child, and it being about all the support that our parents give us. And then the criticism comes in is that from all that support, as students, we just sort of want to play around and take selfies and be on social media. The thing that was important, even in the way I initially thought of it, is that it's about collaboration, actually. It's about working together to achieve something.
I've recently wanted to sort of go on a route where I've been focusing and making people more aware of the gender-based violence issue that we actually have in the country. So I did my first one in Durban the other day. I haven't linked up with any companies, I'm doing it personally. And I want it to become a thing that spreads throughout the whole country and also getting other artists involved as well. I know there are some graffiti artists, female graffiti artists. They're more based in Johannesburg and Cape Town. But the graffiti game is a very ego-driven game, so I think the females have less time for it than the guys.
I would actually like it to impact Durban more, where if it's done on, like, let's say bridges, for example, the government shouldn't necessarily paint it up, especially if it's good work. If it's vandalism with tags and looking ugly, bringing the area down, then by all means paint over that. But like people that actually put out good work there, in fact, encourage it all around. There are certain places, like if you go further up in Durban, like around Kloof and stuff like that, there's so many like bridges that have good artwork that actually uplifts that community.
I think that graffiti in general, in all places, it acts as it helps with like placemaking.
Yes, sure.
And that has happened in some ways in Durban. In a lot of ways, my negative view of graffiti in Durban is that there's not enough people painting, and then what's happened in order for artists to survive is that they've turned to how can they make money from it. So then their painting becomes commercial. It's advertising essentially at the root of it. They're no longer, it's not drawing on the language of advertising and making art. It's taking the language of art and making advertising.
Out of all the provinces, I would say Durban probably has the least amounts of active graffiti artists. And whoever was from Durban and moved out have gone so much bigger, whether they moved to Johannesburg or Cape Town or even out of the country, overseas for that matter. They have grown so much as an artist. They do such impactful work.
Durban is on the map, so we're back on. Durban artists are being respected more, and we're able to dominate the spaces of other areas of South Africa and also international spaces, because the internet has helped us to get on track with other art hubs like in Berlin.
Cape Town and Joburg both have dedicated graffiti supply stores. So you can buy the best quality paint there is. We can order it online from Durban to get it from Joburg or Cape Town. But for a long time, Durban artists made do with cheap paint, made do with household paint, like using rollers and brushes. So they became, and because there were so few artists in comparison, so like if you took 5 random artists in Durban, what they did was so different to each other.
I really enjoy the graffiti scene in Durban right now. I think it's great. And I know people question, some people, is it really a scene? It's not really a scene. And like, for me, it's its own scene. It's a unique scene. It's a Durban scene. And I see young people coming up and I see new names all the time, you know? And I have the perspective of coming from a time when there were like 5 names that you saw and you knew everybody. So now you go out there and there's old names everywhere and tags and fresh things going up. I just get for me, it's like the scene is happening. I think Durban could do with more public arts. I don't think there's enough public art in Durban. And until that happens, I really, really rely on the graffiti scene and believe that the graffiti scene is going to keep it real and is going to hold down that space for street arts until real spaces start to open up for professional public arts. And that's the future for these young writers, you know? And the thing is, they're making that future happen for themselves. They're not waiting. Yeah. They're going out there, they're painting, they're learning about the medium, they're learning about the culture, and they're making space for others, you know? this idea of like, when do you have a scene? And for me, Durban we could say that we had a graffiti scene when someone who wanted to paint, some young kid, didn't have to look beyond Durban for inspiration, didn't have to look beyond Durban for examples of graffiti. So if a young kid's coming up and sees graffiti for the first time in Durban, and sees a variety, and sees different styles, wild style, whatever, and that's their first introduction, then you can say your city's got a scene. That smooth white flow from around the way, 2% more fat, full cream like my name. Talking all the trash about running your game, but you couldn't spell blaze if you were the flame.
Yes, that's all.
Yo!
Woo!